I know that it might be kind of weird for me to be speaking out against like one of the wealthiest um, people in the US, um, because that person does have power and he has been a bully all this time. But I've actually been bullied so severely by all of these people, by Elon Musk and, by different people who work in the system, and by my family. I've just been bullied so badly and for so long that I it it's like I don't know that it's going to end on its own quickly enough. Yeah, I thought that it would, but I guess I was mistaken or deliberately deceived and misled. I guess it happens to the best of us. But I knew eventually that there was going to be justice. I knew eventually something was going to happen. There were a lot of people who didn't and still don't think that justice is something that is going to happen in this situation. And so they've been able to make a lot of videos and a lot of content that's like, you know what I mean? Them acting like they're feeding into those of us who want justice. They're like, it's kind of like some nasty psychological, basically playing in our face because that's what they've always been allowed to do. It's how everyone has always been able to treat these victims, the people who they make slaves. In this situation, if they put their tech in a person's body or brain or whatever, that person in a sense becomes property of that private corporation, business, whichever department of, potentially even the military. If you end up having that kind of thing implanted into your body, there's that chance that you could become what they would consider property of whatever nation's military you are in. So that's a weird thought, to think that because you might be secretly given a Neuralink implant, that the company would go ahead and just consider your entire body their product and their personal what would it be called? You're basically their personal test subject for them to dispose of whenever they're done, is basically what I'm trying to say. The same thing that they would do with like an animal, only it's more important for them to get a hold of the person who they put, their trademarked material into, or injections, whatever nano, they're going to want to keep an eye on those people and to control those people and make sure that those people are brought back in and that their bodies are disposed of in a certain way, because they're not going to want for medical examiners or anybody else to, oh, what's this? Oh, well, that's strange. This is a Neuralink button. I can look these up on the internet, and well, that's strange. This person had a Neuralink device and a serial number in the back of their skull. You know what I mean? Which I'm not sure if there are any good medical examiners anymore, and it's for that point exactly. Because I know that they have a lot of the neurologists and the radiologists on their teams. I guess that all radiology and neurology has all been infiltrated by the bad guys. I guess part of the deal with between the hospitals and the government, as far as the MK Ultra stuff goes, and as far as this illegal technological human experimentation goes, there's this deal for everybody to be hush hush and not say anything about it. And so, because there's a lot of weird little nasty deals in healthcare and in the medical field, that's part of the reason why, aside from this story that I'm trying to finish, I have made playlists about, and there's content and there's information that I've also and that I'm also trying to help spread, to try to improve our insurance and healthcare and medical systems because there's extreme corruption therein, and they are using that to harvest from us in multiple different ways. It's absolutely disgusting. While they play in our faces and are deceptive and do things like prescribe us medication for things that we don't really have, or misdiagnose us with stuff, or tell us there's not really anything in our brains. After you go through so much torment and torture and trauma and fear and terror and torment and everything like that, after a while, and you know who it is that you already know. It's like when I finally was told, or not told, but given confirmation anyways, about at least a few of the people. It's taken me a long time. It's still taken me well over a year to actually begin to make videos and things like that and speak up. And whenever I did begin to make videos and speak up, it was not on this platform, and I would be retaliated against really badly. A lot of the attacks that would come from me making videos or me saying things online have been really, really severe. The retaliation has been really serious. Just in the time that I began to make these Neuralinked videos, I've been poisoned at least 7 or 8 times, just going out to eat and stuff, which is something that I'm not supposed to be doing. I'm not supposed to be going out to eat with people, not at restaurants or anything like that, because they will creep into anywhere and put stuff in your food. A McDonald's, a Dairy Queen, it doesn't matter. And that's really serious. And it's not that they'll necessarily creep in. It's just that they already have certain people working in those places who they can just give a heads up to. Also, seemingly without warning, of course, I am not the person who pays the electric bill here, but within the time frame that I started making these videos, the power went out. I went and bought groceries, and then of course the power had to go out the next day, and then I had to take my groceries to somebody else's house, and it's like the end of the month, and those groceries, half of them are still at that other house, and occasionally throughout the month I would forget that the stuff was even there. I got a big old bag of strawberries in there that I gotta go get. And then I did have somebody like hounding and harassing me in front of one of my kids. It was like the first time that I was allowed to be around one of my adult kids in a really long time. And I had to deal with this dumb hillbilly telling me about how I looked like I was homeless and just acting like a complete idiot. And I don't know if it was a setup or not, but it kind of seemed like a setup. The car that we were in broke down for the weekend or whatever, which wasn't a big deal to me. Like, we had a place to stay and I had my weed and everything, so it was all good. And people do all kinds of things to try to bring me down. And then they had the guy arguing with me, saying that I ripped him off on a vehicle and all this stuff, which I wouldn't be able to afford a vehicle. I was trying to help someone else choose a vehicle so that they would have actually something substantial to show for the money that they've made. But anyways, so basically with this video, I want to start getting into one of the more like creepier, maybe more unbelievable aspects of the torture methods that have been used against me. And that is going to lead me into telling you about the abuse of the psyche, the abuse of the psychic mind, the abuse of the psychic child, just the psychic in general. It's a really, really terrible form of abuse. One way that might be easier for you to understand what I mean by psychic is many of you may know somebody who has autism or someone who is disabled in a way, handicapped in a way that makes them more sensitive. Now, you don't have to be handicapped to be a sensitive person. You can know plenty of people who are highly, highly intelligent. Not that autism isn't potentially a form of intelligence. But autism, especially in that instance, you may have someone who is very sensitive, sensitive emotionally, super, in a very caring way, in a very loving and caring way, a very deep thinker. Well, a lot of these people who have psychic senses, and everyone has psychic senses. Everyone has instincts. Okay, as a body, as just a person, you have animal instincts, And then you're also going to have other sets of instincts because you're not just an animal, you're a human. Okay, so now you're going to get a step up above animal instincts. All right, and those instincts will go from animalistic to a quite more complicated set of instincts, and that can even branch out into what we would consider psychic instincts, or and we can even link up celestially, and it become more of a divine kind of instinct or divine inspiration, or divine. It's more of a spiritual reaction to instincts. And the body, believe it or not, does have physiological reactions to spiritual manifestations. Unfortunately, the abuse of what they're calling the psychic generally begins at birth for a lot of these people, especially people who are in the MK Ultra project. But you don't have to be in the MK Ultra project to have been abused since birth, and you don't have to be, you know what I mean, and vice versa. Have you ever had anybody just sit there and project to you? Like act like they're angry and stare at you and just project their angry energy at you, as though if they just stared at you long enough, they'd be able to make you fall over like one of those goats, off of Men Who Stare at Goats. So that really simply would be like a form of a psychic attack, okay? Hear me out, because I know that this sounds really weird. It's so weird, it's difficult for me to explain. It's difficult for me to even talk about aliens, and I apparently have extraterrestrial DNA. So this is all, you're just going to have to bear with me, because I'm just as skeptical and critical as you guys, if not more. I make fun of this so bad. All I do is talk trash all day long. It's all just so difficult for me. I'm really doing my best. And then there's also this difference. Okay, so there's psychic power, right? And then there's prophetic gifts and prophetic power. And depending on who you are and what you choose to believe in, a person may choose to not believe in any psychic anything, even though the CIA have published all kinds of information about their involvement in psychic blah blah, which is it's all been documented as being very real and something that they confirmed. So if somebody's going to act like the psychic stuff is something that they just don't believe in, they just don't want to believe in, you know what I mean? If for the people who have that mentality, who are like, oh, this is something that I don't want to believe in, I can't believe in, and they just turn it off. That is called dissociative disorder. Okay. And I would say that over half of the United States probably has it. It's so easy for everybody to just be like, oh, this is a difficult thing for me to emotionally accept, so I'm just not going to believe it. And they're just like, oh, I'm throwing my hands on. This just isn't real. And I'm just going to call this a conspiracy theorist, and I'm going to just move on, or a theory, and I'm just going to move on. And, life doesn't actually work like that. We actually do have to, you will put yourself and everyone else in danger if you cannot acknowledge the very real and present dangers right in front of you in your face. If you cannot actually acknowledge the reality in front of you, and you are going to act like it's too much to emotionally handle and go stick your head in the sand, you might as well be like Barbara off of what was that movie, that zombie movie back in the day, Night of the Living Dead? We're coming for you, Barbara. She was in that really serious emergency zombie situation, and all the chick could do is just sit there in shock and stare out, and she couldn't, you know what I mean? The lights are on and nobody's home. And that's what it is for a lot of people, is the lights are on, but nobody's home. You guys are going to hear about, me telling you that Elon Musk is putting potentially, Neuralinked devices in your brain, and that Peter Thiel and all these other people are going to be shooting you up with whatever, this and that, and potentially putting cameras in your eyes, and potentially did this to a lot of people, even little kids. And they became the abuse victims in the Epstein and the P. Diddy cases, and even more heinous cases than you guys have heard of, because they're trying to keep those cases on the down low and never let them come out. They just went this entire time not telling you guys that Elon Musk and all these other people were on the list. And don't let them make you think, like, don't let them lead you to believe that they didn't know that Elon Musk was on the list, because they sure as heck have known. We're just reading through and discovering this right now. That is a blatant lie. They let that man go into the White House. They let him mess around in all of this stuff. They let him mess around in databases, add and remove material, send material to be seen by Russia. The dude explained that Russians remotely took over the database as they were in the White House doing whatever they were doing. So yeah, that's great, especially after, we just had the Bidens questioned about, this laptop and information between them and Russia. You know what I mean? And then Trump was questioned over that sort of stuff during his first presidency. And now we have Elon Musk in Trump's office, doing whatever in databases, and potentially Russians, having access to all of that, which I'm not sure if any of it even matters anymore, because if we got signed into the New World Order, then that means that we are a country that just merged with Russia. So, without all of us knowing, all of them could be putting, their own special database for us all together and us not know anything about it. But I just want to say that it is super crappy that Elon Musk was let into the White House while so many of us were victimized, and we all knew that he was the one who was victimized. You know what I mean? He's only one of the people responsible for all this, I understand. But as far as me concluding my crappy Neuralink videos, this is stuff that I definitely want to say, especially because, this is just the time frame that we live in right now. And unfortunately, this abuse and abusive technology and this mad scientist dude did end up going and chilling with politicians, which was already happening, as we are discovering as the Epstein files are released. I would also like to say that this information was not released until the last couple days. And that was over the last week of me having to figure out how to make a report, or how to let people know that other people have false conservatorship over me, and to try to get that reversed, and to try to report myself as a victim of whatever guardianship abuse, I guess. If they're trying to say that I'm disabled, and I'm being abused by the people who have guardianship over me, then I guess they're abusing their, disabled person or whatever. So I've had to go through that this week, and I think that maybe for the first time, the people who needed to, now I don't know, because I've thought this a million times, but hopefully the people who needed to know the truth figured out the truth this week, and now we see this information coming out. Because it's going to be kind of difficult for everybody to just be like, oh, she's crazy, and you guys weren't able to eliminate all of the witnesses. You were only able to eliminate some of the witnesses. The rest of them still held on, and the rest of us have stayed alive. So, there is that. So I want to begin my story. There is a really terrible kid story. Basically, it's a story from my childhood that it's me doing my best to explain to you a little bit about how abuse of the psyche works. Like I was telling you guys, my tripod was disassembled on the front porch, making it to where I can't really use it anymore unless I want to sit like a duck and be all weird and stuff like that. So whenever I was a little kid, I had just moved into my stepmom's house, and she went in and she showed me my new room, which was her old room. It had a bunch of bows all over the wall, and there was a waterbed, a closet, and there were two windows. There was a window on the back side of the house and a window to what would be my left side. And my stepmom told me, and she was 19 years old. She had just married my dad. They were a couple perverts already. And she told me that I was allowed to look out the back window, but that I wasn't allowed to look out the window to the left side of the house. Okay. And this is something that they've been doing to me my whole life already. But at this point, this is when at 9 years old, I kind of busted them a little bit and got more of an idea of what it looked like, what they were doing. So, she told me I wasn't allowed to look out the one window. She said that there was an old man who lived next door. She said that if I were to disturb him by looking over into his window, that he would call her right away and let her know, and that then they would not be able to make money from him mowing his yard in the summertime. And every summer, I never saw my parents mow the lawn for him. He was always next door mowing the lawn by himself. He would mow it really, really short. But I was a little good girl and I did my best, and I really wanted my parents' approval, my new stepmother's approval, because I had gone through this weird maternal separation thing, and I really did want a mother. So I was trying my best, and they really took advantage of that. So I would play in this room, I'd play with my Barbies and I'd be getting undressed. I was in here at about 7 years old. And I would play and I'd be getting undressed and hanging out. And, occasionally I'd have a friend over and we'd play together. It wasn't that often, but sometimes, I did my homework in that room. I did everything in that room. And I would always feel like someone was watching me. All the time while I'm playing and stuff like that, I feel eyes on me, and I feel those eyes constantly. Almost every day, I feel those eyes on me from that very window that my stepmother would tell me that I wasn't allowed to look through. And I would try to ignore it. Because, that was what I became really good at trying to ignore things, because as a kid, that's really the best thing that, a kid can learn how to do is ignore, kind of like dissociate or have selective hearing whenever it comes to a lot of things like your parents fighting or other abusive outbursts or whatever circumstances happen. A child's ability to not focus on, those harsh, scary things, and to instead focus on, whatever in their own, and be in their own little world, is actually like a pretty incredible protective measure. So anyways, I did my best to be a good kid and to follow the rules that I'd been given. And I did go 2 years following those rules. And within those 2 years, I started to realize some things about my stepmother. And I think that it would actually be the very summer that I thought that my stepmom tried to drown me out in the lake, or she tried to set me up to let me get drowned in Lake Meredith outside of Amarillo. Okay, so I noticed, that my stepmom wasn't the really nice lady that I thought that she was to begin with. I would eventually get really curious and even a little bit offended at the idea that there might be a group of men or a guy watching me through my window. Sometimes I would feel like there was just one man watching, and sometimes I would feel like there were several people watching. Sometimes I would get the sense that my stepmother and my dad were watching me with other people. And so what I'm describing to you is the feelings of being watched. Here I am as a kid, but I'm explaining it to you from a child's perspective. But the same thing happens to adults, right? You can very easily be in a situation where someone is staring at you from a distance, or someone is looking at you, whether it's just because they're looking at you, or whether it's, maliciously, or whether it's whatever, for whatever reasons. A person can generally sense when they're being looked at. You can blindfold yourself and have your friends all leave the house or leave the room and have them sneak in, and you can tell them, you know what I mean? If you're sensitive enough, you'll be able to, while you're blindfolded, tell each other or tell or explain who just walked into the room, you know what I mean, behind you, and who is staring at you. Because we learn, we adapted to, we're aware of, you know, when someone else is staring at us. I don't know how to explain it, but it does have to do with psychic senses. And it's something that other people, I don't believe that they are acknowledging this as psychic phenomenon. When you are just sitting there doing whatever, and you know that somebody who's way the fuck behind you, sorry for the cussing, you can redo this and bleep it out if you have to. If you know that somebody way behind you is looking at you, or somebody's whatever, somebody else, you can feel that. Well, how can you feel that? How can you feel when someone's looking at you? You didn't see them look at you. So you're telling me that you're able to sense that. Well, isn't that some kind of, you wouldn't consider that psychic to know when somebody's looking at you? So the people who have studied this psychic phenomenon for the last, 100 years or better, or however long they've been doing this, they know how real it all is. When they begin psychic twin studies, where they separate twins at birth, they call them twin studies. Those are psychic twin studies. They're not just twin studies, okay? The government knows, you know what I mean? These researchers and agents, they're well aware of, who is psychic and who's not, who's more prone. They do a lot of testing, and their test results are fascinating. Unfortunately, while they're doing those tests, they do hurt these kids, apparently, a lot of the time, and they apparently cause a lot of trauma, and they may have a little bit more of a hand in the outcome of some of these tests than people realize. And that's part of the reason why they have these rules like, oh, we're not going to release the results of this twin study that we did for another 50 years, because we wouldn't actually want for these people to ever know what we did to them. And you know what I mean? Before this information is released, when this person is 75 or 80 years old, we got to make sure that they're not here anymore. And that's basically how they go about it. Or it's, oh, if that person does decide to sue us when we're 80 or 90 when they're 80 or 90 years old, then, we'll just act like all those people aren't around for the, and we'll give them some kind of compensation, but at least we won't have to, at least we won't get in trouble for what we actually did to the ends. All right. So, and I know I biffed this a little bit, but I don't have it written down. I'm doing my best here. So at 9 years old, because I wanted to test my own instincts as a child, okay, I knew that I couldn't just walk over to the window and look. I knew that if eyes were on me in just that way, that I would have to sneak and surprise catch anybody. And this was the first time that I'd ever really tried to sneak, surprise, catch anybody or whatever. So I imagined myself, and this is exactly how I did it. I'll just go ahead, and I crouched down, and I snuck really quickly over underneath my window. And then I darted my head up really quickly right over the windowsill, looked right across into the window across from our house into the other dude's window. It was the first time I'd ever really looked in that dude's window. And that dude was staring at me. That dude was standing in that window, staring back at me, and he had really been standing there watching me for the last 2 years. And here my stepmom and dad had probably been getting paid by the dude and, you know what I mean, accepting payments for him to have access to me whenever I was a kid. And so as early as 9 years old, I got the message that my parents were kind of giving people access to watch me, and potentially more than that. I was really afraid, but that is an example of how the psyche, how a person's psyche can work, how a child's psyche can work, and that any child and person, they can feel when they're being watched. They can feel when they're being watched and made fun of. They can feel when they're being watched and criticized. Um, there are certain of us that are so sensitive. We can pick up on the thoughts and emotions of several different people and groups of people who are watching us all at the same time. I know that's where things might begin to blur for some people between what is believable and what isn't, but this is part of my truth that I really want and need people to know about, because psychic abuse and the abuse of the psyche is a very real thing. It can be likened to the attacks on, the Old Testament prophets or whatever. It's almost kind of something like that. Like you'd have that Jezebel witch queen chasing down and hunting and slaughtering these very gifted prophets, divine prophets. And that's all real old school stuff that really happened. And so today you basically have the same thing happening, only they aren't all, not everyone is acknowledged as a prophet or prophetess, old style Old Testament. Instead, you have people who are being labeled as gifted or psychic or, a number of other things. Some of these people are actually by the government labeled prophet and prophetess. I'm not going to lie to you about that. Some people are actually acknowledged and labeled as prophet and prophetess, and even they are hunted down and attacked and MDK'd. There is an all-out war against those people who have that extrasensory perception, or they have uniquely mutated DNA, or there's been, this incredible war against those kinds of people. I am going to say us. There's been this terrible war against us. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of psychic spies, but psychic espionage is a real thing. There are psychic spies from all over the world. There are practitioners, religious practitioners all over the world who, they don't just practice the cute, sweet little, God religions or whatever that you guys know about. There's practitioners of witchcraft, of Luciferianism. Those people are said to also be quite gifted. So you basically have people who are gifted in very light, divine, star child, very enlightened, like beautiful ways. And then you have people who we're not going to call them gifts. We're going to call them skills. They've got some skills, but they're dark side skills. They're skills that have been finely tuned and trained and learned to kill. Sorry to use that word. I guess we're not allowed to use that word. Whatever, I don't care. I'm using all those words, okay? A lot of these people who are very skilled, they were trained to be expert manipulators. They were trained to be expert dark psychological manipulators. They were trained to be assassins. They were trained to be the best deceivers ever. They were trained to be narcissists and brainwashers. They were trained to, go in and engage in prostitution and, drug sales and, take parts in human sacrifices and other occult related activities. It kind of goes into this dimension of there being X-Men, so to speak, okay? And those X-Men actually being divided down the middle, okay? And there being X-Men both who work as federal agents and higher than that, and then there being X-Men who, just middle class, work regular jobs. And then you've got X-Men who are different than everybody else. They've either been made slaves of, or they keep themselves completely separate from society. And they actually do call us X-Men. That little cartoon that was made, I swear, dude, I think that they made that cartoon just specifically about what's happening. Like, I'm not sure if CIA agents made that little cartoon, but I would. It seems like there might be a little bit of information in there, kind of about what is really going on, or things that that maybe had already begun. There are a lot of ways that a person can be abused psychically. I just remembered a really good one the other day, and then I ran to write it down, and I just didn't get it written down in time before someone else started talking to me about something else, and I changed the subject. So it was like I temporarily lost that example, and I cannot wait for it to come back to me, because the moment that it does, I'm definitely adding it to the video. Whatever it was so good, I can't even remember what it was. It sucks so bad. But I will say that those agents from all over the world, when they would be assigned, I guess, to some of us American civilians, and that they were able to do this psychic torture, and they were able to use these psychic torture methods against a lot of us. And one of the worst forms of the psychic torture was definitely them setting me up to wonder if they were hurting my children behind closed doors. Like, that has been really one of the most abusive things that they've done, and they've had that continue on for just so they've done that the whole time. And it's like, and then also back in the day, whenever I was actually dumb enough to date people, because this is all that they'll do, they'll set it up to where they'll have somebody just being completely straight and honest with me, and then all of a sudden that person will stop and they'll start doing all kinds of crazy, insane things behind my back. And I will feel the things that those people are doing. I'll feel what they're doing to my kids behind my back. I'll feel what my boyfriends, or I would feel what my ex-boyfriends were doing, what was happening at parties. And so my ops began to see this running theme that I would, at home, even though I was separated from everything, that I would legitimately get hurt. So hurt that I was throwing fits, and I was just having such a hard time, you guys, because of what these people were doing. Like the dude may not have ever cheated on me before, right? But he leaves that night and he goes and, you know what I mean? Let's just say that he secretly parties with my cousins and sisters and stepmoms, and he goes to town on all of them, and he goes to town with all these beautiful women, and they're all having, you know what I mean, rituals, and they're all like, you know, thinking terrible things to me, and they're, you know what I mean? Like, I could actually sit in my apartment and feel that, and they knew that, and they could actually watch me, live stream, watch me, and my reactions to what they were doing, to their witchcraft attacks and to their psychic attacks, or with their, you know what I mean? And also, they have used like Christian persecution is part of it. One of the ways that they attack me for Christianity is with oil. They do this oil thing where they, you know how we have holy, divine, blessed oil? Okay, well, they have nasty, cursed, hexed oil that they, you know, use for demonic and heinous things, and then they'll bring that oil that they use for that they cursed and did terrible things to, that probably has, you know, bodily fluids and everything else in it. They'll bring that and they'll put that all over the front of your house and all over your door and all over your, you know, door handle and car handle and all over the inside of your car. And, you know, they'll leave that stuff all outside of your house on the ground and stuff like that. And they'll just come back and just keep doing that over and over again until everything is covered. They'll come into your house. They'll cover your whole house in that. Yeah. And their nasty, golden shower pee and stuff, dude, they'll cover your whole house in that sort of stuff. They literally came in my house. They did that to one of my apartments. So there was not even like a clean blanket or a clean anything in the whole house because of how bad they did that. Like it was really, that was the last apartment that I technically had, that they ran me out of a few years ago. But the attacks on the Psyche, they would just, I mean, on and on and on and on. Everything that these people could think of. And this has gone on. The worst of all of this has gone on definitely for the last 13 or 14 years. I think that I started to tell you guys one time about how I was set up to go into a house before other people got there. And I was able to tell the person who I came with how many people were about to show up and how many minutes that we had before they got there, just in case he wanted to go first. I feel like I'm not doing the subject justice because it is way darker and way more treacherous than I have explained yet. Like the methods and the ways that they have used to test and torture me, and test my telepathy and to try to throw me off and to try to make me think that, you know, maybe I couldn't trust my own instincts at times. Like these people have really done a lot. As far as their nasty telepathy or psychic testing goes, it has been some of the most cruel and sick, dark and demented abuses that I have ever lived through in my whole life. And I cannot believe that there are, you know, psychic spies and secret agents and people like that, and people who like work for the military and, you know, anybody. I can't believe that there's anybody out there who can actually sit and think about someone, stare at someone, send them those bad intentions. Like, how can you guys even do that? Like, how do you, like, what kind of real creeps do you have to be to sit there and send intentions to someone or stare at someone or to try to make someone worry that their kids are getting hurt, or to actually take their kids somewhere far away and actually hurt them to see how I react to it? Yeah, it's been a really rough time, you guys. I could try my best to explain it to you, but I'm not sure that I will fully be able to explain to you just how dark and sinister and disgusting what these men have done. Like that these, how disgusting it is what these people have done, and not just men, but women too. And it's all very sick. They also, like I was saying in another video, putting things in your food. They also consider that part of their psychic testing crap. Putting some shit in somebody's food and drink to see if they instinctively know that they shouldn't be drinking or eating it. Setting people up to see if they instinctively realize that they're being set up, to see how they'll react. Just so many different things. Hurting other people. The kids was one of them, but not just kids, but just hurting other people out of sight, just in general. Making it to where the psychic can hear the distress sometimes even of somebody getting hurt, but they can't see it to actually, you know what I mean? There's a lot of sound torture. How can we torture this person with sound? You know, how can we constantly be an annoyance and tormentor to this person with sounds, but her never actually be able to see who is personally responsible behind everything, and in order to be able to call on for help. And then another way that they have incorporated torture and this psychic testing shit into their situation is to be like, well, if this person is a real psychic, if this person is really gifted, or if this person is really a prophet, then they'll be able to rescue themselves, right? I mean, if they're so psychic, then they should be able to say and do whatever magical thing in order to just save and protect themselves from entire full-ass governments and agents and, you know, all these other douchebags who were paid to torment the same person. Yeah, so along with what they do, they additionally snicker and joke around about how if we were really so psychic, which is what they decided that we were, not us, if we were so psychic and if we were really so gifted and skilled, then we'd be able to get out of this mess ourselves, wouldn't we? Yeah, but it's mostly just like this bullying factor, like, you could have a whole group of women, whether they did it in front of you or not, sit and do a death spell on you, and all of them together talk the entire time and yell and cry and scream and sing songs about how they want you to die and about how they wish you were dead, and have all these intentions, and actually have physical sacrifices, where up to, who's to say? I've heard that there's been up to an 18-person sacrifice to try to hurt me. But a lot of them will use animals. There's different people and different stages of life that they will, sacrifice people during. And there's just all this intention and all of this stuff that's all just sent to one person, and they're sacrificing people to send these intentions and these emotions and these all of this darkness to people, and they're some trying to summon demons and sending demons to that person and everything else, like the levels that they actually go to try to test and hurt people by sending evil and darkness and vicious intent into their lives. These people will even practice sex magic, and they'll go so far as practicing it on little children who they end up 86 and afterwards, all just to try to upset one person. They will send all of that energy to one person to try to abuse them, and it's even meant to kill them. It's meant to send so much darkness and pain and torment and evil and demonic influence and energy to a person that that it just shuts their whole world down and it just ends their lives. Or that it will create some kind of magical chaos around them, and that their life will be ended by that, or that they won't be spiritually protected enough at the time, and that the magic will get past their auric field and all this. And then they had this little disinformation campaign where they had all of these YouTubers all like tell me different things, like, oh, this is what's going on and it's so terrible. And then they'd give me the wrong reasons for it and see if I could catch on to that. They'd have people who acted like they were on, like, while I'm being chased across the country in the Hunger Games, like at one point recovering from amnesia, like running with a little kid, us trying not to starve to death and not to get caught up and not to get unalived and stuff like that. We had these people like basically making YouTube videos trying to see whether or not I would be able to catch on, to whether or not they were being deceptive. And it's like, well, yeah, if you guys are all chasing me across the country and there's nobody on my side, then that would obviously lead me to believe that the people who are on YouTube trying to talk to me are all bad guys who work for the bad guys. But I mean, like, I guess if you all think that you're that bad that this is my only option and I have to go through this hell first before I can get the help that I need. So I basically just spent the last 2 years listening to all of these YouTubers snicker and give me half truths and half explanations about things. And in the end, I could have just gone over to the Targeted Individuals channel and probably learned just as much, if not more. So if there were any YouTubers who were actually good guys and actually did have intentions and were actually doing any of this to help me, then I do appreciate it. But for everybody else to whom it was just like one big stupid test, and you guys just sat back and chuckle, this woman's, she's a little bit off now that we gave her amnesia after we had women slain out on the mountain. We're really funny. So yeah, those are just some, a few examples of what I call psyche abuse, or the abuse of the psychic, or it is also in the Christian denomination, that would be considered Christian persecution, for there to actually be like government agents or retarded little douchebags like Elon Musk selecting us because of our faith, and then testing us because of it. That's really sick too, dude. That's pretty much all the energy that I'm going to have for this video. I do appreciate anyone who has paid any attention. I will sort of apologize for my kind of lower frequency energy right now. I do need to pick it up a bit, but I unfortunately went through something really tragic this week. So, I've really been trying my best. This is, the energy that I'm going to be at right now. This is apparently where I need to be. And I'm not sure if this is my last video about Neuralink or not. It doesn't seem like it, but I'm going to end it here so that it won't take 3 days to upload. And yeah, thanks for listening.